Peoples of the world, welcome back to the EDH Community Theater, highlighting real decks played by real players over on Spell Table and Discord. And Lunchbox, my friend, thank you for contributing this one to the channel today. We have Omnath, Locus of Creation. I shouldn't be shocked that you gave us a landfall deck, although there's a lot more to it than just play a land, do a thing. But before we dive into the specifics of the deck, there's my social details. You can find me on Discord here. There's my TikTok, the server of many things where I play primarily these days. The link is in the description below, so you don't have to copy this jumble of letters. And of course, Board Game Arena. I want to play some Wingspan. I haven't had a chance to play Wingspan yet. The website just got it, so I'm hoping to give that game a go in the near future. So Omnath, Locus of Creation. So Lunchbox, of course, always loved the landfall mechanic, especially with Zendikar Rising. He gets his bundle pack. He gets a Scoot Swarm, he gets an Ashaya, Soul of the Wild, and he gets a Lotus Cobra, and just falls right in love with this mechanic and goes nuts with it whenever he can. So of course he was going to choose Omnath and put a little bit of time and money into this particular build. It's very janky what he's got going on here. It's not a super focused list. This is definitely a for fun, huge pile of cards, scare the living bejesus out of the rest of the table kind of deck. So for a blue, a white, a green, and a red, so no black, but every other color. You get a 4/4 elemental. When this enters the battlefield, draw a card. Yes please, and whenever a land enters the battlefield under our control. If this is the first time we've triggered this, gain 4 life. If it's the second time we've triggered this turn, add a mana of each of these 4 colors. And then if it's the third time, deal 4 damage to each opponent and each planeswalker we do not control. Nasty, nasty stuff there. So my pack 1 pick 1 is a card I am notorious for not being a fan of, the Scoot Swarm. I do not like this card. It's obnoxious. Why is it my pack 1 pick 1? Why is a card that I detest so much my pack 1 pick 1? It's because of the fact that this is a mutate deck. It's a mutate deck. We could mutate onto Omnath and go Voltron-y. Or if we get our Scoot Swarm out, we mutate onto Scoot Swarm, play some lands, make copies of the mutated Scoot Swarm. For those who are not familiar with the mutate mechanic, it's a creature that has an alternate casting cost. If you pay the alternate casting cost, you can put the creature on top or below a creature already in play. It keeps the name and the power and toughness of the creature on top, as well as the creature type, but the abilities stack up. So for example, if you put flying on, if you mutate a creature with flying and say 3 power on top of the Scoot Swarm. Scoot Swarm becomes whatever the name of that card is, a 3/1 flyer, and keeps that landfall ability. Got it? It's a complex mechanic, it's a weird mechanic, but it's what we're going with here. Before we dive into the rest of the creatures, of course, let's just get our artifacts out of the way. We only have 6. Arcane Signet, because reliable mana fixing. Midnight Clock. Once this gets to 12-hour counters, we get a fresh grip. Mirror Box says the legend rule doesn't apply to permanents you control. This is important because some of our mutate creatures are legendary, and if we mutate them on top of the Scoot Swarm, we're going to need the Mirror Box to make sure they don't go away automatically to the legendary role. Assault Ring, Swiftfoot Boots, and Winged Boots. Winged Boots is cool because they equips only for 1 mana, grants flying, and Ward 4. Ward 4 is as close to hexproof as you can get without it actually being hexproof. Because paying an extra 4 mana to make sure the spell or ability that targets this guy doesn't automatically get countered. Yep, that's definitely a thing. It may as well read hexproof. That's how close it is. So let's look at our creatures. This is a very Timmy deck, playing fun cards that he's got. and just, you know, playing big things and swinging big and what have you. So that's what we're going to be seeing a lot of: big creatures, mutate creatures, some value. This is not a fast deck, super efficient deck. This is very battle cruisery, and it's a lot of fun to play against. I think I haven't had a chance to play this one in a while, so I'll have to get a game with Lunch in sometime soon and try to remember. I do remember that SA Tyrant of Gyre Street is obnoxious, and I don't like seeing this across the table from me. Augmenter Pugilist. It's a 3/3, but it gets +5/+5 if you have 8 or more lands. Very, very powerful beater, this thing. In fact, if you mutate something that's naturally bigger on top of it, let's say you mutate a 6/6 onto this, and you reach 8 lands, and it's a 6/6, and it then gets that 5/5 bonus regardless of the timing. So, also the fact that this has this really cool sorcerer in the back, Echoing Equation. So both sides of this card are a lot of fun to cast. Fun fact: Strixhaven just rotated out of standard, so these cards were already pretty cheap to begin with, are probably really cheap now, because I don't see this being a modern or pioneer staple. Here's our first example of mutate. We pay the mutate cost, put it onto our Scoot Swarm, make it a 6/6, and then every time this creature mutates, that includes the first time when you put this onto a creature. Exile cards from the top of your library to hit X permanent cards. And then if you keep mutating more and more cards onto the same creature, this triggers over and over and over again. Avenger of Zendikar. I'm so glad we cannot mutate this onto a Scoot Swarm. Just saying. Azusa, play some lands, extra lands. In fact, 2 extra lands per turn. That's exactly what our commander wants to do, because then we can just blow our opponents away using our commander's triggers. Beanstalk Giant. You could cast it as an adventure, Fertile Footsteps, and then cast it as a creature later. So the fact that you can do both modes pretty easy at any stage of the game. Not to mention the art is crazy good on this one. Brash Taunter. Mutate onto this to grant whatever it is indestructible. Make it a better fighter. And whenever this is dealt damage, it deals that much damage to target opponent. Brash Taunter, very dangerous card here. Coiling Oracle, this comes down. We look at our top card. If it's a land, right to the battlefield it goes. If it's not, right to our hand it goes. Cold-Eyed Selkie. Mutate onto this and swing and draw a bunch of cards. It also has Island Walk, so it's really, really hard to block for most decks. The Dream Tail Heron. This is the great example. This is the example I was going with on Scoot Swarm. You put this onto the Scoot Swarm, granted flying, and then you play a land, copy it. All of a sudden, you've got an army of 3/4 flyers. Very difficult to deal with. Also, the fact that anytime this mutates, you draw a card, value, or maybe you want to give Atali flying. Makes it a lot harder to block. So when she swings out, we get to exile the top cards of our library and our opponent's libraries, by the way, and cast things for free. Eternal Witness. Get cards back from the yard. Everquill Phoenix. This is a weird mutate card. Grants flying, makes whatever it is a 4/4, if it's the bigger number, of course. Whenever this creature mutates, create a red artifact token named Feather with 1 sacrifice feather. Return a Phoenix card from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. Gem Razor. When this creature mutates, destroy an artifact or enchantment an opponent controls. It also makes it a 4/4 with reach and trample, especially on Scoot Swarm. Geode Rager. This card is obnoxious. 6 mana 4/3 doesn't look like much, has first strike, wins a lot of combats, but whenever a land enters the battlefield under our control, goad each creature target player controls. Now, taking away the ability for our opponents to crack back at us. Glasspool Mimic. On the front side, it lets us copy a creature that we control. It can't be a creature an opponent controls, it has to be one of our creatures, but does it at a pretty efficient rate. Alternatively, if we need the land drop instead, it is a Glasspool Shore, which comes onto the battlefield tapped. Glowstone Recluse mutates onto a creature, makes it bigger, and grants it reach. Goldspan Dragon. It flies, it has haste. When it becomes the target of a spell, create a treasure. And treasures we control have tap, sacrifice this artifact, add 2 mana of any one color. Note that mutate targets. So if you were to mutate anything onto or underneath Goldspan Dragon, that'll trigger the first ability and grant us some treasure tokens. Gremgully the Generous makes our new creatures, as long as they're not human, bigger. Luna. Made a commander deck with this once for the channel. It's a pretty nasty deck, I think. But even in the 99 here, still very nasty. For 6 mana, make something on our board a huge flying creature with trample. And then anytime it mutates, exile cards from the top of our library to hit a non-land permanent card. Put it onto the battlefield or into our hand. So it doesn't help us with the land side, but it lets us cheat mana cost of other things over the course of the game. One thing we'd love to cheat out rather than pay the full cost is Jadzi, Oracle of Archivos. It's 5/5 for 8 mana. Why so expensive? Well, whenever we cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, reveal the top card of our library. If it's not a land, we can cast it by paying 1 rather than paying its mana cost. If it is a land, it comes right onto the battlefield. Fantastic. We don't have a lot of instants or sorceries, but the value we get from this is still insane. And if we draw it too early to cast, well, we can cast it for the backside. Journey to the Oracle, double green and 2. Lets us put any number of lands from our hand onto the battlefield. Then, if we control 8 or more lands, we can discard a card to get this right back. So it feeds itself. It gives itself the opportunity to be cast regularly from our hand. Crazy stuff. Llanowar Elves. Someone tell me which language this is. I don't recognize the text. But it is a Llanowar Elves. It taps for green mana. It is celebrating the 30th anniversary of the game. And I actually really like the art here too. So someone tell me what the text is. I don't recognize the scripture. Lotus Cobra. Of course, play a land, get a mana. Migratory Great Horde. When this mutates, we go get a basic. Muldrifter. This enters the battlefield, draws us 2 cards. We can cast it full price, or we can pay the evoke. Mercfiend Liege helps us untap our creatures, makes our commander humongous, by the way, because our commander is both green and blue. Nezahal. Big old dinosaur, can't be countered. And anytime our opponents cast a non-creature spell, we get to draw cards. Parcel Beast. Mutate this onto a creature. It's rare for it to not have a triggered ability, but it does not have a triggered ability. Instead, it has a pretty cool activated ability. 1 tap, look at the top card of our library, and if it's a land, put it onto the battlefield. If we don't, put it into our hand. Moving on to Pilaf. Rewards us for having basics by giving us a plant for each basic land we control. And then whenever a land enters the battlefield from there, we put 4 1/1 counters on a plant we control. Risen Reef. This is an elemental, by the way. So is our commander. When this or another elemental hits the battlefield, we get to look at our top card, put it into play if it's a land, put it into our hand if it's not. Sea Dasher Octopus. I like this the fact that this has flash, which means for 2 mana we can, after blocks are declared, mutate it onto one of our creatures and draw the card. Stormtide Leviathan has Island Walk. All lands are islands in addition to their other types, and creatures without flying or Island Walk cannot attack, so we want to make sure we have some flyers ready to take full advantage of this lopsided effect. Storvault grants the whole board 3. That makes it really, really good, even for that 7 mana cost. And whenever this enters the battlefield or attacks, we make something of ours huge, and we can make something of our opponents really, really tiny. Tatiova. Play a land, gain a life, draw a card. Tuk Tuk, granting everything haste. Fadrock has flying in first strike, can mutate, and whenever this creature mutates, we get a chance to cast a non-creature's card with mana value 3 or less from our graveyard without paying its mana cost. Vulpikeet grants flying and some +1/+1 counters when it's mutated. Yasharn. Not only does this get us both a forest and a plains, basic forest and plains by the way, from our library into our hand, but it also says here, players cannot pay life or sacrifice non-land permanents to cast spells or activate abilities. Yes, this turns off treasures. Fantastic. Good. This is a good meta call, actually. Even if it is a deck that's pretty giant, that's meant to be pretty janky, this is an excellent meta call. And lastly, Yorion, which lets us blink a bunch of things that are in play. You can only blink non-lands. That's fine though. Still get a ton of value with this. That's it for creatures. Let's look at our enchantments. We have Druid class, which rewards us for playing lands by gaining us some life. And if we get to level 2, we could play additional lands on our turn. Level 3, of course, turns one of our lands into a big creature. Felidar Retreat, this is one of my personal favorite landfall cards, because we can either get a creature, or we can make our whole team humongous and with vigilance, so they can swing out at an opponent and we are ready for the crackback. Leyline of Anticipation, granting all of the things flash. And Shielding Flags, throw this onto our commander, draws us a card, and grants it hexproof. This was printed before hexproof was, although they did not update the text when they reprinted this. Interesting. Oh, I think I see the difference actually, because if it simply granted hexproof, and then another player somehow got control of it through a weird effect, then your spells could not target it still. Whereas if, in this case, if your opponents do still somehow manage to gain control of the creature, you can still target it. So that could be why. One other permanent to talk about, it is a Planeswalker, Karn the Creator. Again, shuts down our opponent's artifacts. Also, +1 until our next turn, up to 1 target non-creature artifact becomes an artifact creature. So that could be a thing too. We don't run a lot of artifacts ourselves, but still. Could grant us some more creatures. The -2, not really a thing, unless somebody exiles one of our artifacts. But I mean, looking at the artifacts that we do have, that is highly unlikely. Still, a very powerful middle call here, shutting down all of the treasure tokens and slows down any decks that rely on artifact-based mana ramp. Instants and sorceries up next. Good old-fashioned fog to kick things off. Someone cracks back at us. Well, just fog. Prevent all of that combat damage. Make a stand. For 3 mana, grants our board indestructible. Opt, just a simple piece of card draw. Return of the Wild Speaker, love this card. This won me the Throne of Eldraine pre-release, so glad to see it here. All non-human creatures you control get +3/+3 until end of turn. Or you can draw cards equal to the greatest power among non-human creatures you control. So you can use it as a card draw effect, you can use it as an overrun effect, at instant speed after blockers are declared. You're swinging out with a bunch of plants, make them humongous, knock someone out of the game. Roiling Regrowth. Sack land, get 2 swords, best single creature removal in the game, and Worldly Tutor. Let's go get a creature card, put it on top of our library. Sorceries, the Bala get recovery, lets us get something back from our graveyard, or gives us a land to play, whichever we need. Explore to let us play an additional land. Harmonize, great textless version, which is currently on the list actually. But for those who don't know the card, it's just straight up draw 3 cards. No other requirements needed. Just pay the 4 mana, you draw your 3 cards. Serum Visions draws us a card and grants us a scry. Tempt with Discovery. Boys and girls, please remember, if somebody plays Tempt with Discovery, let them get their 1 land and everyone else just pass. The more people who accept the temptation, the more likely they are to go off the following turn. Do not be tempted by this card when someone else casts it. And if you are going to be tempted, at least get a Ghost Quarter or a Strip Mine. You're probably going to need it. Urban Evolution. That is our last sorcery. Draws us 3 cards, and we can play an additional land. Speaking of lands, we've already seen a couple of MDFCs. We've got 35 other lands, including a bounce land in the Azorius Chancery. Band Panorama. Bark Channel Pathway, which you can play on the front side and it taps for green, or we could play it as a Tide Channel Pathway instead and tap it for blue. Canopy Vista. Command Tower. Cragtown Pathway, which could alternatively be played as a Timberground Pathway. Evolving Wilds, Fabled Passage, 5 forests, a fortified village, 4 islands, 7 mountains, 5 plains. A port town, Prairie Stream, Reliquary Tower, we could draw a bunch of cards and keep them in our hand. Riverglide Pathway, which we could alternatively play as a Lava Glide Pathway. Probably should have explained this earlier in the video, but anytime you see this little arrow symbol on the top on the front face of your card, it means you can play one side or the other out of your hand. Lastly, Terramorphic Expanse. And Lunch, thank you for the deck. You pulled some pretty cool cards and built some pretty cool decks over the years. Now here's where I give you a hard time. Because Lunchbox has made many a TikTok about his love of Ashaya Soul of the Wild. Not in this list. Perhaps you pulled it out to run it as its own deck or do something completely different with it. I don't know. Otherwise, Ashaya is missing and it makes me sad. But in all seriousness, ways that I would spruce up the deck a little bit based on my own experience and playstyle. Well, let's start with a new card, Shana Purifying Blade. For 3 mana, it's essentially a Well of Lost Dreams. Our commander says, the first time you play a land, you gain 4 life. So, assuming you've got some extra mana lying around, you play your land, you gain your 4 life, and then depending on how much money you have left over, you're drawing up to 4 cards. So I think that's a nice spicy pick. Coming from the revisited versions of the Legends, the new Torsten, founder of Benalia, fits the janky nature of this deck perfectly in my mind. 7 mana for this 7/7 human soldier. What I like about it, this comes down, we get to reveal the top 7 cards of our library and put any number of creatures or lands from among them into our hand. We are running a total of 14 cards in the deck that are not creatures or lands. Okay, make that 20. There are 20 lands, so one card out of 5 is not a creature or a land in this deck. So we should be consistently drawing anywhere from 4 to 6 cards when this comes down. The fact that also if somebody board wipes, well, you've got 7 1/1s on board ready to go. They are white soldiers, they are not human, so you can mutate onto them. So I think this fits the janky nature of the deck very, very nicely. A janky card that I like using in a lot of decks, Portal of Sanctuary. It says 1 tap, return a creature you control and each aura attached to it to its owner's hands. We can only activate this on our turn, but here's the thing. Let's say you've got your Scoot Swarm. Let's say you've mutated something onto said Scoot Swarm. Let's say you've made a bunch of copies of that Scoot Swarm. Bring the original one back to your hand, because the mutated card comes with it. No, it's not an aura, but it is still 1 creature coming back to your hand. It just happens to be 2 or more cards. So bring the original Scoot Swarm back to your hand, and if somebody board wipes, recast your Scoot Swarm, mutate it again, play your lands, start the process all over. And of course, something a little more straightforward with the Vile Duplication. 4 mana sorcery says create a token that's a copy of a creature you control, except the token has flying and is not legendary. Yes, that means that even without mutating onto our commander, we could have a second copy of our commander and just go nuts with those triggers. Again, that's just how I would like to run things. Last thing I want to show off before we go is what the full art on that Locus of Creation card looks like. It's a store championship version, and textless, but still looks super dramatic. So yeah, no black yet. You figure once Omnath does get that black pip into its mana cost, that it will be complete. Oh, wait. I think I shouldn't have said that, should I? That is an absolutely frightening concept if it could happen. On that note, sorry to scare the living bejesus out of quite literally everybody watching this video. So let's go watch a different one. Go watch a different one. And also like and sub if you enjoy what we're doing. There's the link for my channel. And we will see you all again next time. Bye for now.